This is episode 98 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And my guest today is Melissa Smith, who will be talking about Caregivers yoga retreats. Let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham with Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have a great guest. Her name is Melissa Smith, and Melissa is doing something rather unique, I think. She's developed a caregiver retreat for all caregivers, I think, although it started with a family member who suffered from early onset Alzheimer's disease, and other family members were caretakers for more than a decade. She specializes in restorative and sustainable yoga, and she's been leading teacher training in the Houston area yoga studios for more than 5 years now. And she considers herself a perpetual student and has allowed herself to continually add new ideas and remake herself every time she's moved. Apparently she's moved a lot. She is giving caregiver retreats. She will give one this year in Calgary and another one in 2020 in Houston. She offers them mindfulness tools and options for reducing stress and anxiety for themselves, and to also utilize these tools with their loved ones. Welcome, Melissa. I'm so glad that you came on the podcast. I think this is an incredible way to use yoga. And is there anything else you'd like to add to that particular introduction?
I guess the latest news.
Okay.
Yeah, that I'm very excited about. So I have moved every 3 or 4 years of my life, my adult life. So we lived in Houston and Malaysia and Calgary, which is why the locations of the retreats have been Houston and Calgary. And now I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so I have just secured a location for 2020 in Santa Fe.
Oh.
So I am so happy to give back the communities. My stepmom passed away from early onset and lived in Santa Fe. So I'm thrilled to be living here now, and I can give back to the community that supported her. So that feels so good. And we have a very unique location. I've always done it in a household setting. So this one will be a completely different setting. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, you said, and I've noticed this happens a lot with yogis, is that they'll take their tools that they've learned from yoga and develop something that helps people because of something that's happened in their own family. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really incredible that you're doing a caregiver retreat, because I know how difficult it can be to be a caregiver and very stressful. So what kinds of things do you do in these retreats that helps people? Because at the end, I'm going to read a testimonial from one of the people that took it. And she just said she was so overwhelmed with all of the things that she received in this retreat.
Mm-hmm. I think what we offer, or what we try to offer, is pretty unique. When I first started, I didn't want to do the retreat without the support of the Alzheimer's Association. I felt like it was pretty important to have, whether it was just their logo or if they were able to offer us more support. More importantly, they have access to all the caregivers. Where I only, I'm doing this to give back because my dad was a caregiver for more than 10 years to his wife. So when I finally was able to kind of secure their partnership, I wanted it to be completely different from the things that they offer. And they are an incredible resource. So if you are in the United States, the Alzheimer's Associations have a ridiculous wealth of information. And I think many people almost wait too late to access that information, where the stress really begins to build and then they don't know where to go from there. So important as soon as you have an inkling of diagnosis to immediately utilize that, because they're a nonprofit and the resources are phenomenal. So getting their support was fantastic, but also I didn't really want to model it after anything that they do. And because they have so many great resources that actually define what Alzheimer's is, how to specifically work with anything from finances to all of the different stages, the focus is actually more on really caring for the caregiver. It's just so similar to what we do, when people step into a yoga studio or they step into a wellness facility. They come in and they take a class and they're greeted and there's all of these different elements onto it that we, I think, take for granted. These caregivers that come to the retreat, I would say right now we're on the 5th year for Houston. So we probably get about 25% or more as repeats. So once they've come, they can come forever. So they can keep coming back. It doesn't matter if their loved one has passed away. So we can continue to support their growth and wellness. But most of them, when they first come, they've never been to anything like this. They've never been to a yoga class. They've never meditated. They don't know basics about nutrition. They don't know what, or they've never had a massage. They've never had any kind of body work. It just astounds me. I think that something we take so for granted, sort of in this yoga world, the idea of self-care, they would never even consider it. So it's just remarkable to be able to provide and offer these kinds of tools for people who just simply either don't have access to it, either with the funds, or it's just not a possibility. They have to care for their loved one either 24/7 on their own, or there's a team of them and they work full time. So they wouldn't even dream of doing something for themselves.
I was asked, because I used to teach seniors, I was asked to do a class for caregivers. And they were very interested, but they couldn't figure out how to get away for an hour.
Right.
It was just, I was just so astounded that they really had no time when they were not caring.
Yeah. It's a huge factor. So what we have done in our retreats is we open it up to, we can accommodate really almost to up to 100 people. And I take 100 registrations. But the attrition is so high, we end up with about 50 almost every time. And it's just last minute cancellations. It's whatever it is, their fear, or their loved one gets sick, or they get sick, or, who knows what the reasons are. But it really is remarkable that it's that high. And part of that could be that there's no investment on their part. I offer it completely free. And that's something that I just don't want to change. So I don't want the finances to be an obstacle for anyone. It's already really difficult enough to care for a loved one with Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia, or it's just really not something I want to do. So with that in mind, it is interesting because they just don't see how that feeds their own soul. And some of them do see that, but yet there's nothing they can do about it because they just don't have the support of the resources.
Yes. How do you fund it then if you're not asking them for any kind of contribution.
Yeah. So fortunately, I have really a wonderful team of volunteers. So the home that we use in Houston is 100% donated. The only cost I have is a cleaning fee. And then the food we get all donated. So whether it's from, we typically have around 30 to 40 volunteers on the day of. So I definitely use the volunteers to help us with groceries and that sort of thing. And then I have some dear friends who work the kitchen, and they work their magic. Everyone volunteers. There's no compensation for anyone. One day I have a vision and a dream of turning this into a nonprofit. And that may happen sooner than later now that I've got 3 a year. And I would love to be able to compensate people for their time, or at least for their gas. But I also love, and I'm very proud of the fact that this is all voluntary. And I would venture to say probably around 80% of those that volunteer have some sort of link to Alzheimer's or dementia. So there's a real desire and a hunger to give back, which is great.
Yes, it's probably the system or the organization you've set up has probably given them something to feel proud about too, that they're helping in this way. So I can see where changing it might be something to think about, shall we say?
Yeah, for sure.
So what does a day look like, or what does a retreat? I assume it's one day. Is it more than a day?
It's just one day.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have, when you mentioned that you taught to a class of caregivers and that they found it difficult to come, what I found is that we've also tried to offer some follow-up classes after the retreat, and we just don't get people showing up for that. I think something as big as a retreat, they find more compelling, and even though it's a longer period of time, I think there's more incentive to make time for that. The day starts out with everyone arriving. The volunteers arrive quite early and get everything set up and prepped to go. And then we have, this is my favorite part actually of the day. The volunteers are all right there at the registration table. And as each caregiver comes, a volunteer will take a program and will tour them around the house. And really, then that is their caregiver for the day. So they are to check back in with them a couple of times during the day. So the caregiver is essentially feeling like they have their own caregiver. And so they just have a little tour. They help them sort of decipher the schedule and what sessions to go to and where to go first. The first thing that we have in the morning is a floor gentle yoga class and a chair yoga class. So really the only distinction is, do they feel like they can get up and down off the floor? So then perhaps they would go to the gentle class. And if not, then the chair class might be more appropriate. And then after that, we have a big welcome and we have a brunch. So I'll introduce all the volunteers and kind of make sure everyone feels comfortable about the day. And we have a big lunch, and then we have an incredible array of offerings. It kind of starts from there. So everyone who arrives gets to sign up for a half-hour body working session of some kind. So it could be a head and neck shoulder massage, or it could be reiki, or it could be acupuncture, or any other kind of energy modality. And this is really, really special, again, because most of them wouldn't invest in something like this for themselves otherwise. And we usually set it all up in one space, in one big room. So all of them are there together, and it's a really beautiful, quiet energy for it. It's amazing. And then we also offer, in addition to that, they can have that or like a yoga therapy session. So people that specialize in whatever it is that's going on in your body. And most of the time it's pretty basic. This last time we also had someone offering Ayurvedic sessions, which I think was really, really fantastic. Of course, many of them had never heard of it. And then from there, that sort of goes on all day, in and between the sessions. We'll have 3 sets of sessions with 3 different speakers at the same time, because we have to be very creative with the space. So they have lots to choose from. And so it could be anything from a talk from the Alzheimer's Association to something about, we had a lovely mother and daughter in Houston this last time talk about self-care, and from their perspective, because they're dealing with it in their own family as caregivers of someone with brain injury. So there's so much richness throughout the day, but really the focus and the key direction I give our session speakers is that that one, they're not talking at them, but it's a conversation. And 2, they should only come away with really about one thing, just one thing. So what would that one self-care thing be? Because they're getting so much information thrown at them all day long that it should be really memorable. And I think our speakers do a really good job of that. As the day progresses, there's so many options they can explore the property because it's outside of Houston and nature, and the same in Calgary. It's in the prairies there in Alberta. So they can go for a nature walk or a meditation walk or walk by the stream or the water. And then everyone sort of heads back for one more session. We usually offer 2 in the last slot, which is sort of a Q&A panel of all the session speakers to get more questions answered. Or there's a breathwork session that we offer alternatively. And then one more yoga class, which is generally just a guided meditation and a restorative pose. So very relaxing. And then we finish up by feeding them one more time before they leave so that they don't have to worry about preparing a meal when they get home. So, or getting something on the way home. It's interesting. I've heard a lot of people call it a yoga retreat, but really it's wellness. And that's my focus is that they start to see that it's like the big picture. I mean, we have everything from Zen doodling and these women sit at the table. One woman, she's 74 and she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. She goes, I haven't colored since I was 6. And I was like, well, maybe today's the day. And so, we're sitting there, coloring together, and it's delightful. It's like they're experiencing things they would never make time to do. It's really remarkable.
It sounds like it. It sounds also like an amazing complex management problem or issue or task. I'm not sure which.
It is definitely. I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily do things small. So I prefer to have an army behind me, which we do at over 30 volunteers, so that, than to do it all myself. So my job that day is not actually to have a job at all, but to really spend time with the caregivers. So I just spend my time, going around and visiting with all the caregivers. I don't actually even teach at all. So I all of it's delegated, all of it's, given to someone else to do for the day. So, and they want to serve, just like you said. So it was pretty amazing.
Well, I'm amazed. I really am. You said that your stepmom had early onset Alzheimer's, and that your father was her caretaker for more than a decade. How did this affect your dad?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's still affecting him, actually. I think we went on a walk one time, and he tried to explain it to me like being a caregiver of Alzheimer's is like witnessing your loved one die a little bit each day. And so there is another grief each day, is there's another part of them that's stolen from you. And I think he probably thought the grief would be quick when she passed away, because she had been gone for several years, up to to the end of her life as far as mental capacity. But it still lingers, right? There's still things that come up. And I think that's with any kind of grieving of a loved one. You have all of this to go through, and unless you've gone through it, no one can really understand, I think, because each grief is unique to that person. But it is especially unique to someone who is dealing with a terminal illness that that just simply has no cure. It's really amazing to watch what he did after she passed away. He really turned towards self-care for himself. He's probably the most active man that I know. Goes for several walks a day with his dogs and works out every day. And, he's in really phenomenal health. And I'm quite proud of that. But I also think there's a part that's still longing for a sense of healing. He had a dog that passed away that was both of their dogs just recently. And it's really sort of the last living link, to his life. And I think the grief there was really surprised him. So I appreciate that question. And it's obviously pretty emotional for me. So
I know. I was thinking about maybe we should go on. I think you're right, though. I had Heather staying on about grief, and she said, you don't ever get over grief. You simply get to accept it a little more each day. And everybody's grief process is different, and that it is not helpful to say, "Oh, you'll get over it," or time will heal. But that's probably not true. So,
since you're on the topic of grief, there is a really fantastic book that helped me quite a bit. It's called "It's Okay That You're Not Okay," and it's by Megan Devine, and it's just meeting grief in a really sort of profound way. So anyway, I found it super helpful.
Okay, so if you were going to say change the retreat, that you could do anything that you'd want to do, what would you change it into, or what would you add, or whatever?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think I'm doing that now. So with the addition of the Santa Fe retreat, I was open to, rather than having a home donated to us, open to an idea of just anything. And I found an incredible facility called For the Love of Learning. And they are a nonprofit that only works with educators, actually. And when I visited with them, they said, "Oh, this is something we've never done before." And they're willing to give it a shot. And it's like a state-of-the-art facility. So I think, to answer your question, it's being open to different solutions and not being stuck on how I always do things. I think when you're open to creative ideas, things will just come. I've never done a fundraiser before, and I put one up on Facebook, and we haven't met our goal yet for Calgary, but I'm hopeful. But we've decided we need a tent this year to add an additional space, because the house we have in Calgary is not quite big enough to hold everyone if we had some inclement weather. And so it's actually more than half my budget, this tent. So it's interesting, you have to kind of roll with it and the things that happen and the shifts. But I would say to anyone listening who is interested in offering these kinds of things, the best thing that you can do is start with the gifts that you already have. Like, what are you good at? I know that I'm great with a large group of people, and to be able to delegate. Like, I love that. And I have no problem managing that. So I would prefer to do something much bigger. But I think if your heart is to work with caregivers, then why not just start with wherever the caregivers are? Go to them. You don't have to create something large and to be able to meet this need and to make a really big impact. I think that there's so many creative ways to do this and to bring it about and create awareness for the needs of caregivers and caregivers of any illness. So I don't know if I answered your question. I guess my heart just needs to be open to ideas is what I think.
No, I think that's a great idea. I really do. Sometimes by doing something that we know really well, we kind of miss out on something that we could do that would be interesting and helpful.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the caregiver retreat and what you do. How do you get the information out to these people that this is available for them?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was super important to me to have good ties with the Alzheimer's Association. So there's the Alzheimer's Association in Texas and throughout the United States. It's a national organization. They have a huge database. So just working regionally with the Houston Association, they helped me disseminate the word out. But actually, our biggest supporters in Houston there are several drop-in daycare centers where folks can come in and they have a place to bring their loved one for the day and have a bit of respite. And they're one of our biggest word of mouth supporters. So they generally give us quite a few leads. And then once we catch on to a particular care group, I've noticed that they'll come in groups. So if we can get one person who's already involved in a caregiver group, then they'll tell their group and then they'll usually come together, which is fantastic. In Calgary, they have a phenomenal society there. It's called the Alzheimers Society, and they are doing incredible work. It is it's just blown me out of the water. They really have a tremendous support. And of course, navigating the healthcare system in Canada is much different than the United States. So their needs for caregivers are similar, but also different. Where healthcare is provided, I find that more complicated healthcare like Alzheimer's still has quite a few hiccups like it does in the United States. So they're fantastic help. And then now in Santa Fe, I've found another nonprofit organization that has a great database and they're getting the word out as well. So I think it starts there. So whatever your vision is or whatever the cause is, you really need to start with local support. And I don't think you have to create that from nothing. In other words, you should really seek to find what is the actual need and are you meeting the needs of your community? Is it not just something that you really want to do? or is there a real need there? And I think that's super important to investigate first.
Okay, excellent. That's a really good idea. Well, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I want to read a testimonial that one of the participants in the Caregiver Wellness Retreat wrote, because I think it's very powerful. And the caregiver wrote, "The Caregivers Retreat was simply put amazing. I was expecting a relaxing day, but had no idea the gift I was to receive. I was pampered, fed, and loved more today than I have been in a very long time. A year ago, I was literally at the end of my rope contemplating suicide. An experience like this would have prevented me from reaching this extreme. Thank you, Melissa, for your heart and doing this for so many caregivers who would otherwise suffer in silence." And I think that's really powerful when she said that the caregivers may be suffering in silence and that you've made a huge difference to that. So I think you're doing such an incredible service, and I want to thank you. And is there anything that you would like to add, or just as the last thing you'd like to say to the listeners?
I think that anything is possible. If there is something that really gets you fired up and is a balance to, the yoga quote industry, I often feel like we are constantly striving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you are trying to make a living at this, it is not easy, and so what this has given me is a really healthy balance of perspective that really, truly, when it comes down to it, everything that I need, it's provided for when I'm doing my due diligence and my, my work. But this other side of the coin of being able to give back is a reward that is just indescribable, really. So it's truly the thing that I am most proud of in my life, other than my boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I would be happy to, if anyone has some questions or are wanting to do something like this in their community, I am very happy to share. In fact, I probably get at least 2 or 3 calls a month about how to start one in my own city, sort of thing. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone who wants to do that. So.
Okay, great. I'll give some contact details so people can do that. Melissa's email is melissa@pranavayoga.studio, and that's PRANAVAYOGA. Okay. So there's Facebook, which is also Pranava Yoga Studio Santa Fe, and the website is www.pranavayoga.studio, and Instagram is Melissa Smith Wilkinson. So thank you so much, Melissa. I think this is an incredible thing that you're doing, and hopefully this will generate some interest for some other people in other towns to follow your lead.
That would be amazing. And if it happens, I'd love to know.
Okay. All right.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you. You've done an excellent podcast. I'm sure people will really enjoy it.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.